Welcome to Hastings Beach. Right now there's a battle being fought on this very beach. You won't be able to see it because it's a political one. It is a battle about fish, about quota, what fishermen can catch in the sea. And this battle is being fought in London and in Brussels.
We lost hundreds and hundreds of boats, thousands of fishing jobs have gone, mainly due to the common fishery policy.
We're seeing jobs disappearing and catches getting smaller and smaller.
That we stop overfishing, that we reduce the size of our bloated fishing fleets, and we ensure that small-scale, sustainable fishermen have a future.
Well, this fight is between the large-scale fleet and the small-scale fleet. And the large-scale fleet is represented by the NFFO. 2 years ago, a group of small-scale fishermen felt unrepresented by the NFFO and decided to split off the organisation to start their own association called the NUTFA, the New Under 10 Fishermen's Association. I spoke with Jeremy Percy, who is one of those fishermen that split off, and I asked him why they are fighting the NFFO.
Well, we've always had concerns. NUTFA was formed by small-scale fishermen for small-scale fishermen, and we're now moving more into a sort of domestic debate here about the allocation of quota. Now, it is a fact of life that the NFFO and the producer organisations together control their members 96% of UK quota. So despite the fact that the small scale guys you see here represent 77% of the overall UK fleet, the active fleet, we have access overall to only 4% of quota. NUTFA feel that's entirely unfair and iniquitous.
I am heading to London, the battleground for this fight. Because in London, NUTFA have allied themselves with Greenpeace to fight the NFFO together. I'm going to ask Greenpeace why they have joined forces with the NUTFA and are now campaigning against the NFFO.
Well, the NFFO is the Fisheries Minister's top advisory body on fisheries matters, and they claim to represent UK fishermen. We wanted to find out whether that was true. What we did find out was that they've actually hoodwinked our fisheries ministers because they are not what they say on the tin. Despite claiming to represent British fishermen, we discovered that not only do they only represent a fraction of the UK fleet, but that their members are dominated by foreign fishing barons.
Now, what do you hope to gain from the fight with the NFFO?
Well, I think the first is that there must be transparency in the fishing industry. We must make sure that those who lobby our decision makers are transparent about who they represent and also about how much quota their members hold, because that's the one issue which affects fishermen's livelihoods the most in this country. The second is that we need to get the voice of small-scale fishermen heard. That means working with them, making sure that their voices are heard around the table where decisions are made and that they have a chance to positively affect their own future.
Representation is the key thing in this fight, isn't it?
Absolutely. If you're not at the table, you're not going to be heard. And at the moment, small-scale fishermen, and they have historically not had a strong voice at the table because they're quite disorganised and there are lots of them, and mainly they are fishing every day. They don't have the time nor the resources to represent themselves. This is partly why Greenpeace and NUTFA, who represents the small-scale fishermen in the UK, have come together in a historic alliance to make sure the voices of these fishermen who tend to fish in the most sustainable way, who look after their local patches, who maintain the economic, cultural and social fabric of coastal communities is really secured and championed.
How does Greenpeace help the NUTFA?
Well, I think NUTFA's view has always been that we've been arguing with the environmental sector for decades, and we've stood there throwing rocks at each other for decades. And we came to the view and started discussions with Greenpeace on the basis that whilst we will disagree about some elements, there are nevertheless some issues where we can find agreement between us, and we are then both stronger because of it.
We saw it was absolutely essential to form what is now a historic alliance between small-scale fishermen in the UK and Greenpeace, so we can work together to get them a much better deal in the future.
Now, I asked the NFFO to respond on the attacks Greenpeace made on them. However, they declined to respond before our cameras. They asked me to read out a statement they put on their website, so here it is. The NFFO calls all attacks made by Greenpeace on the NFFO as unqualified, assumption-based nonsense. They also say that 8% of the members is foreign. They also say that Greenpeace is distracting their efforts to help the small-scale fleet in the UK. Now, this fight between Greenpeace and the NFFO is far from over and will last for the next couple of months. This battle affects small-scale fishermen throughout the UK. Meet Robert Ball, he is one of them. He is a Hastings fisherman with an under 10 metre boat, and this battle over quota and representation is vital for people like him.
Since 2006, when the quota started coming in, air quota has gone down and down and down. First of all, we was on about 2 or 3 tonne a month, which was quite nice then, in 2006. But now we're down to kilos a month. It's just, you just can't work on it. When we had a cod quota in January, we had 125 kilos. 125 kilos, that's about 4 kilos a day. One fish. How can we survive on that? It's impossible.
And what is not for doing for you right now? Do you feel...
Well, I just think it's fighting for the under 10 metre boats. Hopefully to get more quota.
So the NUTFA is fighting for you?
Yes, yeah.
Now we move on to the second part of this fight, which is in Brussels. The European Parliament set out in February reforms for the Common Fisheries Policy, otherwise known as the CFP. And the European Parliament said in these reforms to support small-scale fleets throughout Europe. Now, I interviewed Keith Taylor. He is a member of European Parliament for the Green Party, and I asked him, how can the European Parliament help small-scale fleets like the one here in Hastings?
Well, we are helping the fishing fleet overall in the way that by 2020, if our recommendations are followed, the fish stocks will be sufficiently improved up to be 80% of their maximum sustainable yield. So that's to say there won't be overfishing, there won't be fish discards, there will be fish in the sea when the fishermen go out, and they will be able to catch and sell them. That is what the Europeans are doing for the small-scale fishermen. I mean, the common fisheries policy was going nowhere. It would have carried on overfishing. It would have carried on throwing fish away, perfectly good fish, and catches would keep getting smaller and smaller. And so something needed to happen. I'm really happy that we've actually been able, in the European Parliament, to take the first step.
NUTFA, everybody so clearly recognises that the CFP, past CFPs have been complete failure. The first CFP on page 1 said the aims of this policy are twofold: to maintain fishery-related employment in European waters and to maintain fish stocks in European waters. And it's palpably failed to do either, and everyone's very clear on that. So we need a root and branch reform. So our worry is that, as ever in the past, that you tinker at the edges, that you fiddle about, that people come out with broad statements, yes, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and then it goes into some back room and there's a bit of horse trading and a bit of dealing, and the end result doesn't result in a really long-term sustainable policy.
The first is that we need to really restore our fish stocks. Currently, more than 60% of fish stocks in Europe are overfished, and that's causing all sorts of problems for fishermen. I mean, that's really clearly obvious. The second is that too many subsidies are going towards destructive fishing practices, and that needs to change. We need to stop that and start rewarding sustainable fishing practices with our fisheries subsidies. And the third thing is that we need to start rewarding those fishermen that fish in a more sustainable, low impact way, and those are often small boats. And that is what we're trying really hard this year, together with NUTFA, to campaign for. Once the CFP is negotiated and the deal is done later this year, and that will put in place a new system for the next decade, it will be up to the UK government to ensure that the changes that were made at a European level are implemented and felt by the fishermen of this country as soon as possible.
If the reforms are not going to be put in place, if the NFFO and the NUTFA lose their battles in Brussels,
If they lose their battle, and we don't get the quota,
or the reforms, what then?
I will personally think we're out of business. Full stop.
Now this altogether is going to take months, maybe years, to help the small-scale fishing fleet in the UK. So people like Robert Ball will not have a certain future for a long time coming. Ronald Sundry reporting from Hastings Beach.